Studios, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hello, welcome to the COB this Thursday afternoon. I'm Juliette Sarli. Great to have your company on a very negative session for the local market. Let's have a look at how the local market is finishing the day's trade. And we're down 1.4% there on the CBO 200, the ASX 200 also off by a similar amount, really dragged lower by mining stocks here. We've got iron ore at a 2-month low. And markets on edge after several days of escalating tensions in the Persian Gulf and Israeli operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon. This, of course, all raising these concerns about the durability of the US-Iran talks. So let's get to our themes of the day. Minor meltdown, that's really where we have seen quite a lot of the weakness coming through in these mining stocks amid the weakness, I should say, there with what we're seeing with iron ore prices. Iron ore down to a 2-month low, really extending this week's loss as well. Another one of our themes was what we're seeing with the SpaceX IPO. So to the moon here, and I am going to read you through some of my clever puns that I had on this story earlier. So Elon Musk aiming for infinity and beyond. This time he wants investors to come along for the ride. SpaceX preparing for what could be one of the biggest IPO launches in history, looking to raise around 75 billion US dollars. That's more than 100 billion Aussie dollars, potentially reaching a valuation here for about 2.5 trillion Australian dollars. Now, so this is the company behind reusable rockets, Starlink satellites, streams of colonizing Mars, and it's plotting a course to Wall Street with Musk maintaining mission control through a voting structure that leaves him firmly in the captain's chair. Are you catching all my puns? Now, supporters say it's an opportunity at the final frontier of AI, space infrastructure, and next generation communications. Critics, however, argue the valuation may have escaped Earth's gravity. Then our other theme of the day was this glass half full story, really, as we see Treasury Wine Estate telling shareholders at its Investors Day that it will narrow its focus to just 10 key brands. Let's have a look then at some of the sectors that we are monitoring and kicking it off really with these consumer stocks. Treasury Wine Estates there up 13%. Endeavour also on the tailwinds of that momentum up by around 3%. Let's have a look at the miners though, because this is where we saw the weakness. Not surprising though that BHP came off those all-time highs reached yesterday when it was nearly $65. Rio Tinto also falling by around 4%. You have to remember that this weakness that we're seeing in iron ore is because of shipments from Guinea's massive Simandou mine have soared, and that is of course very much controlled there by Rio Tinto. And the banks, let's have a look at how they're faring, also under pressure, CBA there at $164. Looking at some other corporate stories, we touched there on Treasury Wine Estates gaining on this review of its Americas operation, Pro Medicus renewing its 5-year contract with the Ohio State University for $16 million, shares though under pressure. Hyperion X says its Titan Critical Minerals project in Tennessee is financially robust, but shares were down 4.5%. Orica also under pressure. It appointed SGH Director Mark Johnson as an independent non-exec director. And the ASX a little higher. It's seen a sharp lift in trading activity in May alongside weaker capital raising conditions. Let's get to our guest for this afternoon, Jimmy Jang from GBA Capital, who joins me. Good to see you as always, Jimmy. So we're calling it a bit of a minor meltdown today. The miners really are under some pressure.
Absolutely. Obviously, well, one of the main kind of things that kind of really drove the sell-off today was the oil surging again due to the US-Iran tension kind of growing. It's the energy market remains extremely sensitive to geopolitical events and also miners as well. So we kind of seen it quite regularly now, where whenever the tensions escalate in the Middle East, investors immediately focus on the potential supply disruption. And right now, it's the probably worst time to have this kind of geopolitical risk, because June is typically a pretty slow month for the year. We've got a lot of people that's actually selling more than buying just because of the tax loss that they want to realize. We also have now the SpaceX IPO coming ahead as well. So a lot of people are, even within my own investors are getting rid of a lot of their positions just to fund it as well. So, it's a pretty tough time for a lot of miners, especially those that are quite underwater, because the investor sentiment is to kind of realize that loss, and prepare a new fresh portfolio for the new financial year as well. So it was good to see, however, some of the other stocks doing quite well today.
What do you think about the SpaceX IPO, Jimmy? I mean, I was mentioning it would be about a 2.5 trillion Aussie dollar company.
Look, it's probably going to affect, SpaceX. Look, to be honest, it's more of a coin flip, in my view, just because of the valuation proposition. Look, whether it will eventuate to that or not is not really where the investors are focusing on right now. It's the optimism of the AI and obviously the space as well. So what we might actually see, and like I just kind of briefly touched on, is you might actually see a lot of the investors wanting to go hard in the beginning, just because of that, open, upside that the, IPO really kind of, offer. But at the same time, we might see a lot of turbulence in the meantime. So this might be another Tesla stock where, for $1 trillion market cap company going up and down like a trampoline. And, some people might be loving it because they find the right timing to make money. But at the same time, some people might hate it absolutely. Like Tesla stocks, for example, it's a very binary kind of stock. So in my view, it's a great opportunity, but for the long-term investors, it's not something that I'll probably jump in straight away. It's to kind of see how it opens and see if there's some buying opportunities that we can slowly get in, because it will be a very volatile stock. So it really, I think, depends on the investor sentiment, Juliet.
Yeah, it might crash back down to earth indeed. All right, let's talk about some of the consumer stocks. Sorry, I can't help myself. I have about 50 puns on this. Let's talk about some of the consumer stocks, because Treasury Wine Estates, I mean, that was quite an impressive jump today. We also heard from the RBA governor speaking today. So what's your view on some of these consumer stocks?
Yeah, look, the market was really looking for that reassurance, and the management, delivered, with Treasury Wine. It was really, pleasure to see that happening today. So there was no downgrade to the financial year 26 or financial year 27 expectation. The margin expansion targets remain quite intact. And the China inventory destocking is also progressing as well. So those kind of longer term earnings target kind of really suggest that upside potential. But the most encouraging aspect was the management's confidence around achieving margins above 25% over time. So if they obviously execute that quite successfully, then there could be some very meaningful earnings growth beyond the current consensus expectation. And I think that's why the market really applauds the company with the results today. So Treasury Wine is definitely a higher probably upside we can probably expect. And like I said, it's probably if they do achieve those margins over 25% over time, then I think the market will be continuously rewarding a lot more as harshly punish the company as well.
Yeah, and interesting, Endeavour Group was also higher, and I think that was thanks to Citi as well, a broker upgrade there. What else is on your radar, stock specifically wise, Jimmy, given that we're kind of pretty flat for the year and we're already in June?
Yeah, look, it's a very tough time to, stock pick at this moment, just because, fundamentally a lot of companies might be really strong. However, just due to geopolitical tensions that we keep on seeing, left and right, it is very tough time. However, there was a company that I've been advocating on Ausbiz for a while now. There's a company called Control Bionics. The ticker code is CBL. So, they had a very, promising and a compelling update today. So the investors were quite encouraged by these US distribution agreements, German insurance reimbursements, and the letter of intent covering about 1,000 devices as well. So it's in the medical, device sector. So yeah, I think healthcare is definitely is a main focus, just because they are cyclical as to what's happening in the Iran and in US. So it's probably not a bad time now to slowly accumulate some, stronger positions in the healthcare space, just because after the storm has come, although we probably will see the minerals come back, but at the same time, people will remember that, if something happens in the US and Iran again, we must see the turbulence all coming back at the same time. So companies like Control Bionics, where they deliver that a strong medtech, results to the company, to the market, that's often the stage where a lot of the institutional investors also begin paying much close attention as well. So CBL might be another good one to put on the watches and kind of monitor how everything goes this week.
All right, you heard it from Jimmy first. Thank you, Jimmy. Have a great rest of your day. Jimmy Jang from GBA Capital. Back to stock specifics, the stock of the day was SpaceX. Andrew spoke to the Marks, Mark Morland from Value 3, Mark Gardner from MPC Markets.
Just on the Tesla merger argument, I think it's likely. I think Musk would like to do it, but he has to do it. His biggest challenge is he effectively doesn't have control of Tesla. And remember, he had a lot of problems and moved from Delaware to Texas because the court rejected his pay deal that had been signed off by shareholders and the board. So he's had a lot of struggles where he's limited on controlling the company. So with SpaceX, with his preference shares, he has, I think he controls about 84% effectively. So he has complete control.
I mean, if you're not getting it on the IPO, you're not buying it market on open day one, I'll be waiting for it to probably halve and then get involved. These numbers, the TAM numbers that have been bandied around are total space affected TAM. So this 28 trillion number it wraps up a whole bunch of different industries. It basically, and if you go and do global GDP numbers, you're essentially buying something now that in 9 years' time will be on the promise that it will be 3 times the size of the healthcare industry in the world.
10 stocks picked by you, 2 experts, 1 hour.
Let's get to the companies that have been nominated by you.
It's like a witch hunt over there. Everyone hates data centers.
Just remember that most of their earnings are offshore, so there's no franking credits.
The call is brought to you by Centuria, an ASX-listed property fund manager with $21 billion in assets under management. Want to diversify beyond equities? Explore the Centuria Sydney CBD Prime Office Fund at centuria.com.au.
Let's have a look at some of the leaders in today's session. Kicking it off with Treasury Wine Estates rallying after it told shareholders at its Investors Day that it will narrow its focus to just 10 key brands. Telix Pharmaceuticals also had a good session, as did Ample, Brambles and 4D Medical. The laggards in the big end of town were Vulcan Energy, up by about 9%, and a lot of those uranium players that did well yesterday, Paladin off by almost 8%. Gold stocks also dumped, Northern Star down around 7%. In the small end of town, we had Coronado Global Resources up an impressive 15%, Terracom and Victory Metals also good. But the laggards in the small end of town included Frontier Energy and the Brisbane Broncos off by about 13%. Let's have a look at what we're expecting tonight. We've got those US weekly unemployment claims ahead of the key non-farm payrolls Friday, and a number of earnings including Lululemon, Planet Labs and Brown-Forman, which is the maker of Jim Beam whiskey. Tomorrow, locally, not a lot happening, which is often the case on a Friday. We've got Japan leading indicators and later in the evening, the US non-farm payrolls, as we mentioned. Let's have a look at where the local market has finished the day's session, and weakness of 1.4% there on the CBO 200, while the S&P ASX 200 has closed lower by more than 1%, or about 100 points to 8,686, crossed below its 125-day moving average. All right, we'll wait to see what the Wall Street session brings and how that will affect our market on the final trading day of the week. I will note that the index so far is up over the last 5 trading days by 1%, and I sound like a broken record here, still unchanged since the beginning of the year. We'll catch you from tomorrow morning. Have a great night.